Welcome to this very special edition of The Author's Voice with KAJ, a show where we explore the stories behind the stories. Here we dive into the worlds created by authors, discover their inspirations, and ensure that you walk away enriched and inspired. And today we have with us author Phil Whitebloom, dynamic sales leader with over 40 years of experience in sales and executive leadership. He has driven over $1.5 billion in career sales, leading teams across Americas and across the Americas. And he's the author of Handling Objections, Cues for Closing the Sale. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show once again, this time on the Author's Voice with KAJ. So we'll be talking about the book, Handling Objections, Cues for Closing the Sale. We'll talk about that. But first, let's talk a bit about, how did you get to writing in itself? People are busy. You have been in a sales position, and that will hardly leave you any time. Where did you get this inspiration of becoming an author and writing this book?
Well, when I started the business and it was focused in on sales coaching, I met somebody named Brianna Henley, who's now a business partner of mine. And we have our own podcast, the Been There, Sold That podcast. And she said to me one day, she said, you really should write a book. And I had been talking about that with my wife for a long time. In fact, my wife said, it took a long time for you to write that book. I said, yeah, I know. It was about 18 months from beginning to end. She goes, no, it was about 30 years. Because you've been talking about it for that long. But when Brianna suggested that, then she introduced me to Honoré Corder, who's written about 68 books herself and is a well-known author. She became my mentor and my executive book publisher and everything else. And that's how I came to write this book. It was probably long overdue. And then here I am. And it did take a while because, like you said, it was busy. But once I sat down and I found my great writing spot, then I was able to move through it. And then I had a lot of people around me to help me and consult with me.
Absolutely. And Phil, let's come to the book in itself. This is the book, Handling Objections, Cues for Closing the Sale.
Correct.
By Phil Whitebloom. So Phil, what about this book? What do you have in this book? Why should people be interested in this book?
Because in selling, as much as just about everything in life, we all face objections. And in some ways, it sounds kind of silly, if you will. But if you didn't come up against an objection, was somebody actually really listening? Are they even interested at all? Because when they're following the details is when they're going to give you an objection. And an objection is not something to be dreaded, not something to be feared, because if it's a real objection, the objection is really important to them. It's very important to them. And that is where the rest of the title for the book comes from, the subtitle, Clues for Closing the Sale, because you could talk about all these different things, but what they object to may be the thing that's most important. And when you overcome that objection, you may have overcome something that has been their biggest problem, the biggest challenge they've been facing, and you will have a much better chance of getting the sale. So when you hear objections, pay attention, because those are the clues. And that's how I came to writing this specific book.
Right, Bill. So who is this book for? Is there a particular audience, only salespeople, or is it their bosses, or much more beyond that? Because a lot of customers, they are not being treated well. What have you dealt in this book? It's a big area to deal with.
Right. So I wrote the book specifically for people who are involved in selling. And that could be the salesperson, salespeople themselves. It could be sales leadership. It could be people who have to attend lots of meetings and they're trying to sell their ideas inside these meetings to others. And there's going to be lots of objections that come up. And how do you handle these? You could handle them professionally and really overcome them in such a way that everybody is very happy with that result. or not happy with it, and then you know it's time to end and move on, right? If you can't solve somebody's problem, then just move on. You don't have to spend any more time. But I'll tell you, it was one of the things that was interesting is somebody that read my book has nothing to do with selling. She actually happened to be going through a divorce, and it was not a fun divorce. I don't know that any are, but she told me, she said, "Hey, Phil," she said, "I want to let you know that your book helped me get through my divorce proceedings and how not to be argumentative and actually work through these things and make sure that everybody understands and you make your points clear." And who was expecting that? I never wrote this book with the intent of helping people who are going through personal crises to have it help them, but it did, at least in one case.
Absolutely. So, Phil, you talk about, high impact questions. What are these high impact questions? Is a salesperson in a position to ask any question at all? And then you're talking about high impact questions from the salesperson.
Yeah, so and that's a great question in itself. So let me ask you, why did you ask that question, and why do you believe that question is important to the listeners here and the viewers?
Right, because my listener who is trying to understand, he would be somebody who would be wanting to understand something from an expert like you, and they would want to understand it from a common person's language. Obviously, all the top people will not listen. It is people, small businesses, somebody who is struggling with sales, individual freelancers, anyone, a man on the street who is trying to sell something. They would want to know, how they can improve their skill. This is where the focus of the show mainly is, for business people and all of those. And here it is about a book which will impact them. So obviously, I have to understand it from their understanding. Okay, how would they understand it the best way? And anybody would want, I can ask questions, but I want to understand from Phil, what is this high impact question?
So thank you very much. Did you see how you explained all of that? That's because I asked you a high impact question. I could have said, our high impact questions are asking open-ended questions. Are they important for your listeners? And you could have said yes, right? And that would have been it. Or you could have said no, and that would have been it. But neither one of those told us anything. But when I asked you, why is this important to you and to listeners, and in that way, and why is that important? You explained the whole thing. That was an example of a high impact question. It's not a trick. There are no tricks. It's really about getting the people that you're selling to, the people that you're working with, to give you the information that you need in order to help them. And asking high impact questions is the absolute best way to do that, because you get a full understanding. And the rest of that is that you could ask the following question. After you're listening to their answers, rather, you could say, "Hey, I was really interested in this particular portion. Could you tell me more, please? Would you tell me more?" And then they will. And then you learn more and more and more about how you could help them. And it's really not about maybe what they first asked you for. It's about all the underlying reasons behind, and the high impact questions will bring them out.
Absolutely, Phil. When do they know that the person is, the sales, the buyer, the potential buyer, or, is having objections? They may just be inquiring about a few things and that is it. How would I, as a salesperson, know that actually he's talking about he or she is talking about an objection, and I need to come in much more strongly than I would if I understand it's just as pure information?
Right. So that's great, because sometimes salespeople will get defensive, and there'll be just simply a question. It's not an objection. And because they'll get defensive in the answer because they thought it was an objection, now they've created a negative scenario. But the other thing is, sometimes you have to realize that a question actually may be a soft way of presenting an objection, because they don't want to hurt your feelings, or whatever the reason it could be. And so you do that by asking a question. It's always about asking the question. So if somebody comes up and they say to you, a pretty regular one for everybody worldwide is, it costs too much. Yeah, I don't like your price. And that could just be something that people say because it's their job to get the lowest price, or it could be something more. Um, so we instead of just justifying the price, where many salespeople go in and say, "Oh, but you get all these things, everything else." Well, guess what? None of that is really important to them. But by asking the question, you say, the first thing you want to do is you want to acknowledge it, and you want to say, "I hear you." I said, "Price, money is important to everybody," and when you say it costs too much, or could you share more with that? Are you relating this to something you purchased from us earlier, or maybe the same thing, or are you talking to others and getting quotations from them? Is it over your budget? Could you please share more about where why you're saying that it costs too much? And then you shut up. And I say shut up instead of being nice and saying then just listen, because I want people to remember, be quiet, let them talk. And even if it's quiet from them for a second, and they're going to go, if it was really a bluff, then they may not even know how to answer that question. But if it's a real situation, they could say, this is way over my budget. I wasn't expecting, to have to pay this much. And I'd say, oh, tell me more about your budget. How was that figured? So instead of just saying, hey, let's see if we could cut your price to meet your budget, or what is your budget, you want to find out what were they thinking of getting in their budget. And you might have been pricing a car. You might have been presenting to them a small truck when they were budgeting for a small car. And you have to say, well, why were you budgeting for this? What is the purpose of the vehicle? Why, and then you want to make sure that they're actually even budgeting for the right thing. So you ask all these questions instead of just jumping in and just cutting your price, or just saying, hey, this is the price, and leaving. There's more information behind that. How did I do with that answer?
Very good, Phil. Let's understand it a bit more, better. You talk about handling objections, and the salesperson also has to keep an eye on sale, making that sale, close that sale. And also, there is a lot of talk nowadays of building relationship with the customer.
Right.
So the salesperson is under a lot of things that he needs to calibrate. One is the building relationship,
yes,
closing sale,
yes,
and also handling objections. How does a salesperson? It looks like he has to be an Einstein at the same time, to take care of all the things. How does he calibrate all these three things at the same time, Phil? What is the best way? You are an expert in this sales part. You would be able to tell it. And have you also discussed about this in your book?
Yes. So the first thing the salesperson has to do, all salespeople want to make their sales objectives, make their number, and they also want to make money. They want to make a nice living. So, but they have to get out of their own head. This is the first thing. You have to focus completely on your prospect and on your customer or client. You have to be there. You have to be out of your own head, because when you're in your own head, then you're not really listening to what they're saying. So when I'm here with you today, and I'm here with you and your listeners, I'm focused on you. I'm not in my head. I'm not thinking about my things that I have going on, or that I want to really do a good job here for you and on this podcast. I'm listening to your questions and trying to give you great answers. This is what they have to do. So when you get first, that's the first part. The second part is that, yes, the ultimate objection is to make the sale. But remember, we are selling to help people. So first we have to make sure that we have something that can really help them with what their problem is or what they want to achieve. And when you do that, then you have to find out what the reason is. Why are they wanting to do this? And it's amazing what you will learn, what's behind there. I'm currently working with somebody, and I'm working with them to help them to hire salespeople better, because there's hiring salespeople is difficult, and it's costly when you don't do it right the first or second time. So, but in this case, the reason isn't that just they want to have a salesperson that's going to make sales. The reason is because this particular client wants to sell his company in 10 years. And in order to get there, his company has to have a certain large value to it in order for him to get the price that he wants when he sells his company. And he knows where the value is. He's done all the research. He's got the consultants. He's done a brilliant job, but now he's got to drive this revenue. So it's not just helping somebody to find a good salesperson. It's helping them to find the right salesperson or right salespeople that'll match their culture, that'll do the job, that'll get him to where he needs to be when he's ready to sell his company. So I'm not really helping him to find a salesperson to sell. I'm helping him find a salesperson that's going to increase the valuation of his company so he gets the best money for it at the end. And that's how this all comes together. So when you focus that, I didn't lose sight of the word relationship. And this is how you build relationships. It's not about just taking people to lunch and being nice to them and asking about their families and all these other things. It's about really understanding where their needs are and what they want at a very deep level. And then they trust you. And when they trust you and they like you, they're going to do business with you because they know you have their best interest in mind. And you're just not focused on making the sale because the sales will come.
Absolutely. Now, this is a author sort of a podcast, author's voice. We talk about books from authors, and authors need to, they not only need to be creative, but they also need to be salesperson in several sense. And at that point in time, when they are trying to sell their book in one way or the other, they might meet, objections from unexpected quarters or unexpected objections also. What would you suggest authors, especially who are coming from a creative line like yours, but you have been in the sales line, but many people are not at all in sales. How do they handle these objections, both in front and also in reviews? You will find those objections at many places. Any suggestion, any ideas for them?
Yeah.
Phil?
Yes. So I had somebody tell me that you really made it as an author when somebody tells you they don't like your book. That means, hey, you got a big enough audience that it's not just your friends reading, right? And what I would say is you thank everybody for their opinion, for their view, because that's what happens when you're a writer, right? And sometimes there'll be golden nuggets in what people are telling you, and you need to listen to that. And some people they'll just find something wrong with everything. So why would you want to get into an argument with them, or why would you want to get into a discussion? Because what is going to come from that? So if somebody comes up to you as an author, and remember, there's when you write a book, it's no different than anything else that you own, and that's your baby. And that's how many people will take things, personally, just because we're humans. And what you want to do is you want to step back for a second. You want to say, well, that was a very interesting comment, or a very interesting statement that you said about what I wrote. Could you please share more with me what you're thinking? And you still don't have to get into an argument or discussion, but you're going to listen to what they're going to say for a minute or two. And then you're going to say, well, I appreciate your feedback, and I'm going to give that some consideration and move on and go, but in another side of that is if you're an author and you're trying to become a speaker and talk about your book, or you're trying to get somebody to put your book in their stores and they're raising objections, you have to find out why they're raising the objection. Because somebody may say, well, I can't put your book in my store at this time. Oh, why not? Is it because you don't like the thing I wrote about and you just don't want to put it in there and you're da-da-da-da-da-da? And then you went off on this whole tirade and a complete defensive and offensive attack on this bookstore owner. And then the bookstore owner is going to turn and say, no, because we're closing for the next 3 months to remodel, and we're not going to have anybody's books in here. Now, how do you feel? I could guarantee you that bookstore owner doesn't want you around after you just tore into him or her, and all they're trying to do is remodel to make their bookstore nicer. So you got to find out what's going on. And there are people that will just attack you because that's what they do. You don't give them you don't give them the credibility or anything on their attack at that point. You just say, thank you for your opinion. I am moving on now. And you just walk away. So all kinds of, but if there's golden nuggets in there, and many times there are, you can say, wow, and take some notes so you could fix them in the next version or talk about them some other way and say, wow, I never thought about it that way. I really do. And I really do appreciate you bringing that up. And then you can write about it in your weekly blogs. You can write about it in your newsletters and all these other things that you use to communicate with your community. So that's what I would say is always ask those questions. Find out what's behind those questions, because you could be guessing the wrong way. And you don't want to do that. And then you build relationships with those people. These people that could be your enemies are now your friends. So at least a frenemy. So
right. Any particular thing that you want, that you have written in your book, that you want your readers to at least know about for sure? Obviously, they will decide they will buy the book when they buy the book, but something you want to tell them, well, this is something you must know about from this book.
Yes. I want everybody to know that there's a process for handling objections like everything else. Everything formulates around the questions. But the first thing is you need to do is you need to acknowledge that objection. Like somebody says, I don't like it in green. Does it come in any other color than green? And then if you turn around and you say, I hear you don't like it in green. Is there any other color? They're going to say, didn't I just say that? Now they're aggravated because you just repeat them for word. You say, but you do. I said, I hear you. You prefer a different color. Thank you. Could I ask what it is about green that you care for, and what colors would you prefer? So that's the high impact question. So it wasn't just that, and then what do you prefer? So you get more information. So you're acknowledging, then you're asking that question, and then you're listening to why these reasons are behind it. And you say, oh, then you get it. So you acknowledge it. You ask questions. You may ask questions to learn more about what you just heard. Then you give your presentation as long as you can. So, you can address it. You can say, oh, so I understand. So if this came in blue, and if it came in blue, then that'd be a much better preference from what I'm hearing over green. And they could say that's correct. And then you could give them what's called a trial close. So a trial close is where you're asking if you were to buy something, but you're not really asking them for the order yet. But if they come back and they give you something negative on that, then don't move because you haven't handled that objection successfully. For example, let me give you an example. So now we've kind of I understand that blue would be a better color for you. Let me ask you, if you were to move forward, how many would you want? Would you want 10 in blue, or would you want to take 50 in blue? And they could come back and say, could I get 25? And as long as the answer is yes, you say, no, that's great. So what just happened? They gave you a positive response. You weren't asking for the order. You were asking if, and then now it may be time to ask for the order if you've covered everything else, because all you could do is talk past the close. Or they may say, hey, Phil, stop right there. I didn't say I'm getting anything. You say, and I wasn't asking. I was just saying if this was blue. So obviously there's something more that we need to cover besides the color. Please share with me what that is and why. There's your high impact question. So wasn't a no because I didn't ask him for an order. And I fleshed out that there's actually something else, that the color may not have been the real objection. There could be something else. So now we're still in this. So I haven't moved on in the sales process. I'm not talking about anything because we are still here. And until that person comes back with a very positive response to that trial question, then you need to stay. But once they came back and said, could I get 25? You say, yeah. How soon would you like them? Would you like them by the end of this week or by the end of next week? You don't put it off 6 months, right? Unless it's a big thing that has to be built. And then they could say, yeah, no, could I get them right away? And you say, that'd be great. Let's do that. Let's take care of that right now. And you could go close the sale right there. So that's what I want people to take away in this is I want them to say, you acknowledge the objection, you ask questions to find out more about it, you ask trial closes to make sure that you've covered it correctly. And then that will tell you that it's okay to move on to the next step or maybe go right to the end. You'll learn that right from that. So the process is all in the book. There's lots of examples, and that's what I want people to take away. Don't panic. Be thankful for an objection, even though it sounds kind of crazy.
Absolutely. There's so much to learn from you about all this, Phil, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more about you, what you are doing, want to get associated with you, also get hold of your book. What is the best way for them to do so?
So to get a hold of me, I'm just going to give everybody my business email address, and it is Phil, Phil, been there, cs.com. So, and that's BEENTHERE, C as in Charlie, S as in Sam.com. PhilipBeenThereCS.com, and you could also go to BeenThereCS.com on the website, and you can connect with me through there and learn more. And the book's available on Amazon, everywhere. So, and many other platforms. So it's great. I can't thank you enough for the opportunity.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the Author's Voice with KAJ. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.